and I just need to move on. I have hope, I'm open to a new. Hey, 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 hey. Oh. Hey, 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 hey. Yeah, I'm all alone and still learning to let go. I'll carry on my own and find out where I belong. And I just need to move on. I have hope, I'm open to a new place, a new road. I'm on my own, but I'm better off alone. Yeah, I'm better off alone. And I wake up to a new day in the same place with a new flame. It's not too late, I'll be okay. Leave behind all that led to my pain. And I know it's never really ever quite perfect, but I know the hardest things are always worth it. Yeah, I'm all alone and still learning to let go. I'll carry on my own and find out where I belong. And I just need to move on. I have hope, I'm open to a new place, a new road. I'm on my own, but I'm better off alone. Yeah, I'm better off. Got demons in my head, they're better off dead. I'll find a way to kill this sorrow. Got demons in my head, I used to regret being a better place tomorrow. Got demons in my head, they're better off dead. I'll find a way to kill this sorrow. Got demons in my head, I used to regret being a better place tomorrow.
This song's a little sad, ain't it? Alright, let's stop the music. Okay, I don't know who's gonna jump in tonight. Ugh. Okay, so we're gonna finish off our project on Jonathan, on Javier Peremo. We're just gonna finish him off. We're not gonna do anything too heavy. We're gonna just watch his very first video, his latest video, and his most popular video. We're gonna watch just little segments of it, kind of get a flavor. Because like I said, I don't want to, like I said in my video critiquing everything that he was saying, his argument was bad, but I don't want to assume that his worst argument is a characterization of who he is. You know what I mean? Let's see what is actual, if he's actually well-rounded or not. So we're going to be looking at why did a certain person become Reformed instead of Catholic? It's a 2-hour video. We're not going to do 2 hours. We're going to do like maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes max. We're going to be looking at Protestant response to the Farmer Ali Bestucky debate, which wasn't a good debate anyway. And then we're going to look at why you should be Lutheran. And then it goes instead of Roman Catholic. He really needs to stop with the Roman Catholic thing. But anyway, okay. So outside of him using slurs, let's see what happens with his with these videos. Okay, let's go to over here. Ooh, it's a little warm in here. My AC is off. Let me see. What do I have it set at? 77. No kidding, it's hot. Okay, let's cool it down. Let's cool it down. So we're going to do all three. And again, we're just going to do little pieces of it. And then I'm going to go ahead and go forward to wherever he is. I don't know where his last one is. And we'll finish off his last one as well. The one that we were watching together. We'll finish that one off. I think it's on here. I don't think I've taken it off. Oh, I'll find it. And we'll watch the very ending of that one. All right, let's do this. Let's have a little bit of fun. Oh, there it is. And we'll finish this guy. Let's go. Let's see what this guy's all about. So this one is his latest video, his oldest video, and his most popular video. We're just gonna get a little flavor and get a little spice.
That was before I went to TireRack.com. Tire Rack's tire decision guide.
There we go.
Here in college, I began to really think about some other things all the way from K through 12, and highly recommended, by the way. Loved it. But I don't think my mom really, I mean, she knew it was a Presbyterian curriculum, but she didn't pick it for that reason, obviously. But kind of through that, I was introduced to.
And it happens to me as well, even though, again, one of my best friends said, you know what, I was raised going to Catholic school. Let me look into. No, thank you so much for sharing that. And again, like you said a couple of times, we'll try to unpack some of your reasons and stuff here in this Q&A portion. I want to comment on a few of the things that you said for people at home before we get to those. And that's one, as you mentioned, right, that you kind of become exposed to this through having Roman Catholic friends, right, who are actually devout, and you start looking into some of these issues. For me, it was the same thing, right, with one of my best friends being a devout Roman Catholic. The funny story there being that he was nominally Roman Catholic.
Yeah, but if you're using the term Roman Catholic, that probably means that your friend wasn't very Catholic, because then you wouldn't be using the term Roman Catholic. You'd just be using the term Catholic. But whatever.
Catholic, and then we met in high school, and he saw me hosting Bible studies and doing all this, and he then said, you know what, I was raised going to Catholic school, let me look into what we are supposed to teach or whatever, or believe. And he went and became really Roman Catholic. And I always joke around that, like, oh man, we should have got him before he went back and went back to Catholic school or whatever, as far as his resources. But putting that aside, what I want to draw out with that, with both of our experiences, that people should understand is, sometimes, and it happens to me as well, even though, again, one of my best friends is Roman Catholic, it happens to me. I don't know if it's ever happened to you, but I know it'll probably happen to people at home, where when we become really consumed with the Roman Catholic Protestant polemics, which we're going to engage in in a second as well, but sometimes we get very consumed in those, it's very easy to start looking at everyone on the other side as, for some reason, either malicious or dishonest.
And okay, so everything he just said there is wrong. So first off, you shouldn't be looking at apologetics for your answers for what it is to be Catholic. Apologetics is just one front, and professional apologetics, I should say, not just apologetics, because there's a difference between apologetics and professional apologetics. Professional apologist is just one front of the Catholic approach, the Catholic call, if you will. So you shouldn't be looking at that. And I've made the mistake with Protestants as looking at their apologists and at their preachers as that's an example of what they believe. When you talk to Protestants face to face, and you're actually, I've been doing this now for 11 years. When you talk to them face to face, they're sometimes worse, but most of the time better than what their apologists and their preachers say. So just be aware of that. So he's being dishonest here with his, I don't know, flame of dishonesty he's just he's a cage stage Calvinist. I don't. Juan says, "What's up with former Catholic school students believing they're an expert on Catholicism?" I don't really have an answer for that. Most of the people who went to Catholic school are not very good Catholics, and this is something most Catholics know. Most Catholic schools are not very good when it comes to teaching Catholicism. I have a cousin who unfortunately left the faith, and she was an altar girl. She was very Catholic trained, and she has no catechism. She has no catechesis in her head. She has nothing. She knows nothing of the faith. She knows the practices, and that's it. And as far as I can tell, that seems to be the problem with Catholic schools, is that they teach the disciplines and they teach the practices, but they don't actually teach the faith. I didn't go to Catholic school, so I can't state that categorically. I can't. I can't be the one who makes that argument, but that's what I've seemed to notice, is that most people I've talked to who went to Catholic school, they were taught the discipline and the practices and not taught any of the reasoning. Hello, legends. Hello, Thomas.
One of my best friends is Roman Catholic. It happens to me. I don't know if this ever happened to you, but I know it'll probably happen to people at home where when we become really consumed with the Roman Catholic Protestant polemics, which we're going to engage in in a second as well, but sometimes we get very consumed in those.
And also, he's identifying that he's doing rhetoric, he's doing polemics, he's doing apologetics. So he is not honest at all. This is not an honest critique of Catholicism. This is not an honest presentation of Protestantism. He is in cage stage Calvinism. He's in cage stage, I don't know, Lutheranism, if there is such a thing as cage stage for them. And he's an online polemicist and an online apologist. He's trying to get famous out of this. He's trying to make money out of this. He's trying to make a name for himself, which is fine. I'm not doing that. I've been on here for a very long time. I kind of quit caring about fame and all that kind of shit a long time ago. I do this because I care and because this is something that I'm passionate about and something I enjoy. I am not an apologist in any kind of way. I'm an anti-apologist, and I'm very clear about that. So I don't know. I don't like Javier's approach. I don't like Javier's reasoning, and I don't think he's right for this picture. I'm in Miami, and I'm happy because I am in Ares Antares. Cool. I don't know what that is, but cool.
It's very easy to start looking at everyone on the other side as, for some reason, either malicious or dishonest or downright just negative.
It doesn't have to be dishonest. People can just be ill-informed on other people's version of the faith. Until the internet, you didn't even have a way to know someone else's practices unless you went to their church. So this is all, you've heard of rose tinted glasses. This is all like black tinted or gray tinted glasses. Whatever the opposite of red tinted is, rose colored glasses is. Rose colored meaning good. Whatever the negative version of that is.
Looking at them when people shouldn't do that, right? There's no reason to do that. And I think, like briefly, like you covered in your story, having these friends, and I don't know, surely I'm sure you are still friends with them today, or if you saw them on the street today, right, you'd get along. And the same thing with my friend. And so I just want to say for people at home, just because we get involved in these polemics doesn't mean that we're going to the first.
You shouldn't be doing polemics. I mean, that would be number one.
Of our questions here. And so if you can unpack for us which of Rome's claims most troubled or unsettled you when you first heard them, and then how you went about evaluating and eventually discarding the merit of those claims.
Yeah. So I think there's kind of four of them I'm going to go over that are kind of the main ones, and there's sub ones under those. But the first one is justification. I had this understanding of what Catholic justification was. I thought they were just, they had their merit sheet and they're making their tallies. And
no, that's not. First off, you had a wrong idea. Secondly, so Protestants keep on using terms that we don't use. So sanctification is what Christians use. They don't use the term justification. So once you're putting it in Protestant terminology, you're already going to get the formula wrong. It's like if I tried to put a Protestant practice into Catholic terminology, it wouldn't work.
If they get enough, they go to heaven. That was kind of my idea of it growing up. And as I got a little bit older, I had a little bit of a better understanding, but even then, not a good one. And I had heard that, and I'd heard this from Reformed teachers. I had heard online and things like that. And I'd heard this from others, but this idea that, the Catholics really base their idea of justification on like James 2. James 2 is talking about Abraham, and you're not just...
Again, we don't talk about justification. That's just that's not how we speak. It's bad framing. Let's go ahead. Let's move ahead. Like I said, we're not going to stay on this too long.
As a Baptist, where the sacraments are just purely symbolic and there's nothing else going on.
Right.
Again, they're not sacraments. They're ordinances. I just feel like he doesn't know enough to be talking about what he's talking about. When I started off talking theology, I was only talking based on what I knew. I wasn't talking based on what I don't know. And when I got into debates, especially with Muslims over bits and pieces of the Quran, I would go to the Hadith and I would just read what it said, and I'd learn. And when they would challenge me on something, I would go look it up. I feel like he thinks he already knows, which is a big problem. You can't learn if you think you already know the information.
Just wanted to add that.
Yeah, no, there's some stuff for sure where it's like, yeah, but I'm like, well, I believe in justification by faith alone, and I'm a Calvinist. Like, I mean, I can't really believing baptism does anything. So, and I had no deeper understanding at the time. But that was kind of my idea at the time. So I just kind of pushed it off to the side. And I thought about this and struggled with this for a long time and studied it. And I'm reading articles and I'm reading books and I'm listening to podcasts and and I'm poring over the scriptures and I'm thinking about all these things myself. And
I feel like the books he was reading, though, were not heavy theological books. He probably wasn't reading the church fathers. I could be wrong. He was probably reading apologists, more than likely either Catholic or Protestant apologists. And he was going to Protestant apologists to understand Catholicism. That's inane. That doesn't work.
Writing things down. And eventually I reached a point where I thought, okay, I've learned a lot from some of these Roman apologists and teachers. Actually,
Well, if you're saying Roman apologists and teachers, then you didn't learn anything because you don't even know what they're called. So that's a problem.
A Roman Catholic, a Muslim, an atheist, who even just slightly knows what they're talking about, like out in the wild, right? That wall is coming down. And I think people, the more that we learn, the more that we become students of church history, the more that we become students of the Reformation and of these various issues.
Church history didn't start at the Reformation.
We should seek to actually interact with the other side, right? And say, and so you talked a little bit about, reading that Greg Bonson article and how you came to understand Sola Scriptura differently. And so could you maybe
church for the rules of faith? Now,
and so you talked a little bit about, reading that Greg Bonson article and how you came to understand Sola Scriptura differently. And so could you maybe unpack that a little bit more? So what is it about that article and maybe some of the stuff you read after that made you understand Sola Scriptura in a different light? And then how did that affect the way that you viewed these other issues, right? Like justification, like prayer, like the cult of the saints and these different things.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm so glad.
And again, listen to what he's calling it, the cult of the saints. So he's using lingo and it's not jingo. It's not jingoisms. Anyway, he's using Protestant terminology here. He's not even using Catholic terminology or Catholic phrasing, so he's not engaging in the material honestly or seriously at all.
Question. I love talking about Sola Scriptura because it's such a wonderful doctrine when you actually understand what it is. And first off, let's define it. Sola Scriptura is the belief that Scripture is the only infallible authority that Christ has given to the church for the rules of faith. Now, that does not mean it is the only authority whatsoever. A very simple example of this is your pastor at your church, your teaching elder at your church. Some of these teachers were broadly speaking in the church, great teachers and theologians from church history. Even above these, I would put things like the councils of the church, the creeds that we have, some of the confessions of faith that we have. All of these have a certain amount of authority, and then that they demand.
And yet all those come from the Catholic Church.
Immediately had things coming to mind. Now, I want to be careful here because I don't
Except
want
for your pastors
to. Just a second, I'm going to close this window here.
Sure, no problem. I feel like alluded to it.
So far, I haven't heard anything really all that interesting, and it seems that his ignorance that he's showing in the video that he did on countering, I guess, or attempting to rebut Joe Heschmeyer, seems like that ignorance is not just, it wasn't just him being ironic in that video. It seems like he actually is ignorant.
That it's very specific just to themselves, right? One of the things that I've mentioned on the channel ad nauseum, and I'm sure people that listen to the channel get tired of hearing me talk about it, but because I hate the double standard, that same sort of thing happens, but in the reverse, where they'll pretend that something that is like everybody's problem is just the Protestants' problem.
Right.
Right?
Yes. And the fact that they often use is, and I've heard this from apologists, and I heard this from Catholic friends, and it was this one really frustrated me, is a lot of times they'll try to entice Protestants who are really struggling with these issues by saying, listen, you don't have to be sure about everything that's going on in the church. Like, you don't have to be sure about all of that. You don't even have to participate in everything. There's nothing saying you have to pray to Mary in Catholicism. You don't have to.
True.
Just join up. Even if some of those things are giving you pause. It's like, well, that's true. However, by joining the Catholic Church, I am making a commitment to I can never oppose those things. I can never oppose those things. I have to recognize, okay, those things are true.
There's reform inside the Catholic Church all the time. So this is also untrue. You can't oppose the dogmas, but the dogmas that are in the Catholic Church are roughly the same dogmas that are in all Christian, Trinitarian, Christian apostolic traditions. Because we're all going to the same councils, same rulings.
Ultimately, why did the alluring and troubling, we covered this a little bit, but why did the alluring and troubling parts of Rome not end up bringing you to Roman Catholicism? And what are some of the greatest weaknesses and problems which you perceive in Roman Catholicism?
Yes, well, obviously the authority.
It seems like it's just a polemic channel against Rome, because his top 3 videos all have to do with Catholicism.
Issue, I think, is at the forefront of all of this. And I'll get into that in a second. I also think there are biblical issues with some of these things.
Why does the word, Juan asked the question, why does the word cult have a negative view in America? In Mexico, cult is common when referring to Marian venerations. Cult has a bad connotation. It's not that it actually has a bad view. If you're in theological circles or scholarly circles, cult and sect just means a religious group or centered around a single figure. It's when it's in the vernacular, when it's used in common parlance, that it has a negative connotation because of things like Heaven's Gate and a few other major cults that have the divinity, was it branch divinity or church divinity, whatever the Waco thing. It's because of really bad things that have happened with cults, with designated cults here in the U.S. That's why. And also, Mexico, while it became secularized after the French Revolution, it has a history of Catholicism. In America, it's a history of Protestantism, and Protestantism views all Catholic stuff as negative. And so there's this really sad thing in Protestantism, in American Christianity. And there's a few Protestants who were debating each other. I was listening to them this morning and listened to them last night. One guy is the same in both debates, but it was 2 different guys. And then I think today he was talking to Trent Horn as well. But they were talking about what it's like to be Anglican and what it's like to be Lutheran, high church Lutheran, not low church. And they were comparing notes with each other, one Anglican, one a Lutheran. And they were saying how, they got disheartened with American evangelicalism. One of them is not American, but they got disheartened with American evangelicalism and American Protestantism specifically because of the fact that when you looked into the claims, it became, well, whatever Rome is doing, and that's the term that they use Rome, whatever Rome is doing, we're going to do the opposite. So it's not ecclesial, it's not dogmatic, it's not theological. It's simply, if Rome does it, we're going to do the opposite. And once they realize that, a lot of these arguments, a lot of the stuff that Javier is saying just isn't true. He's just simply being contradictory because he doesn't like Catholicism. So when you actually strip that away, so there's high church Anglicanism, high church Lutheranism. He says he's a Lutheran, but I think he's low church Lutheran just based on what he says. But if you're high church Lutheran, you have a very high sense of liturgy and a high sense of Mass and a high importance to the sacraments. And you don't think of them as ordinances, you think of them as sacraments. So Anglicanism and Lutheranism hold those things as important. So he might not understand his faith very well. I know that he says that he just joined a Lutheran church, so he might not understand his faith very well, or the Missouri Synod Lutheran might be very different than classical Lutheranism that you'd get in Europe. So I don't know. I don't know enough about Missouri Synod Lutheranism to comment on what their standing is on liturgy.
I think the Bible simply contradicts Rome on certain points very clearly. One of them has to do with the idea of apostasy and assurance of salvation. If somebody that is truly regenerated, can that person truly lose?
And salvation, assurance is not a thing that Catholics care about. So we're gonna move on. Like I said, we're gonna try to get through these.
It takes 5
but certain kinds of Protestants are deep in history. The Reformers certainly were. When you look at Luther and you look at Calvin and you look at some of these people, they really did care. I think a lot of times they actually have a very kind of global awareness when it comes to missions work and things like that I haven't necessarily seen. No, we need to keep growing. Semper Reformanda, always reforming, right? But in almost every facet of the teachings of Reformed theology, you see this arrow that's pointed to the absolute and infinite supremacy of God, and the fact that all of history is an OCD person's dream. I mean, there's just this endless amount of like rabbit trails to obsess over and go down, and it's true.
Yeah, but if meant to the ill people have a problem with something, that doesn't mean that the thing is bad. It means that they themselves have issues.
And this kind of goes for if you have OCD or if you don't. I think sometimes we can kind of become arrogant in this.
There we go. Yeah, everything seems to be just focused on Catholicism on his channel. That is not very interesting at all. Okay.
A published apologetics researcher and a church history enthusiast. And this channel was a place for me to just welcome to the channel.
This is his first his first video he ever made. Again, we're just doing a deep dive today. Tomorrow we're going to be moving back to the Techno-Puritans because that's more fun. But I wanted to give him a fair shake to see what he's really about, and it looks like he's not about anything.
Everybody, my name is Javier Perdomo. I am a Baptist pastor, a published apologetics.
He's just anti-Catholic, which is an old bias and an old hypocrisy and an old, if you want to call it a type of racism, you want to use that word. But no, it's a bias. He's hateful. He's anti-Catholic, which is sad. But yeah.
Researcher and a church history enthusiast. And this channel was a place for me to just post videos on things that I care about along those lines, on theology, on apologetics.
I want to be very clear. I'm not anti-Protestant. You know, I'm very much not. I'm anti-ignorance. I'm anti-lying. I'm anti-propaganda. That's why this channel is anti-apologetical. That's why Oh, Vaughn, you're going to have fun tomorrow. You're going to have fun tomorrow. Come back tomorrow, 10:30. Come to my channel. We're going to have fun. Techno-Puritan is a brand new religion. It's a Protestant religion. Unfortunately for Redeemed Zoomer, and he has not yet taken flack for this, he endorsed these people. And that's how I discovered them, which is a mistake on his part. They founded a new Protestant religion called Techno-Puritanism. These are atheists, secular atheists, and they're trying to create a new religion. And it's basically digital Puritanism. But they kind of don't understand what Puritanism is. And it's really fun. These are writers for the Wall Street Journal. They're husband and wife, although for some reason they look like brother and sister. And apparently I'm not the only one who noticed that. There's some commentators, like professional theologian commentators who don't like them, who have called them the something twins. I forget what something twins, the techno twins, or the digital twins, or the maybe it's the heretical twins. I think it's what it is, because they look exactly alike. Even though they're husband and wife, they're not related. They look exactly alike. They have the exact same face. It's actually kind of creepy. But you know, that's neither here nor there. They say you're attracted to people who you look alike, so I guess it would make sense that you'd be attracted to someone who has your face. So I guess that makes sense.
On church history and on
come back tomorrow. We're gonna have a lot of fun with them. They have a pro-fapping video that I'm gonna be working on tomorrow.
At large, which is an issue that I really care about, being that I'm a Protestant myself. And so along those lines, I have a couple of videos that I've had in the works for a little bit, introductory videos on creeds, on why we should care about the church fathers as Protestants.
I realize most of this is religious stuff, but I feel like that's manga. Is it just me, or does it look like a manga book, like a manga collection? It does, right?
Things along those lines.
But a video has just come out a couple
You
days
mean
ago,
Naruto?
published by Candace Owens, who's a pretty big, I guess, a conservative political pundit here in America. And so as a result of that, the video's gained over 300,000 views. And that was a debate between a Roman Catholic and a Protestant, the Roman Catholic being Candace's husband,
He's really got to stop saying Roman Catholic.
George Farmer, and the Protestant being Ali Beth Stuckey. And the debate, like I said, is garnering all kinds of attention. And so I thought that, there were a few things that I saw in that debate where, in my mind, when I put myself back a few years ago, when I first started looking into church history, when I first started looking into Roman Catholicism and Protestantism, I feel
I really don't feel you know anything about church history, buddy. I think your church history ends at the Protestant Reformation,
like had I watched this debate,
and then the
I
rest is just cliff notes for you.
may have come away with more questions than I would have answers on my side, and I may have come away with a few concerns. And so I wanted
It
to put together
wasn't
a
a
video.
good debate, just
like I said, I
FYI,
had other
for
things
those
that I've been
wondering.
kind of
It was
working
a
on, but I wanted
terrible
to pause
debate.
and put this video out to maybe help address some of the arguments and some of the points
Neither
that were made
side
by
was really
largely
all that
George
smart
Farmer,
or sharp.
which if you've spent any time in the scene between
And Ali
Protestant and Roman
Bestucky is
Catholic, you
really
recognize a lot of these
dishonest.
arguments. You've heard these arguments utilized a million
Ali Bestucky is a dishonest interlocutor, and Candace Owens is a grifter. So there was not a lot of honesty there to be had. So, all right, let's check out. No, I don't want to see the clip. I don't care about the clip. Let's hear his little bit of response, and then a little bit of the tail end, and we'll move on to the next one.
resurrecting the church, which was lost immediately after the last apostle died, or that he was creating a brand new thing, right? We have people that walk around as Protestants of all kinds, and they say, what are you talking about? This person from church history from 600 years ago, they're Catholic, they're not Christian, they're not Protestant, and it's just completely wrong, right? And it's wrong not just on a historical level, not just on an actual survey of church history. That language is wrong, but also it's not even accurate, and it's not an accurate representation of Martin Luther's thought on the matter. And so I thought we would benefit from actually seeing what Luther himself had to say on this, because I happened earlier this week, actually the same day, which is why I decided to make this video, that Candace's video came out. I just so happened to be reading with my wife a few more verses out of the book of Galatians in this commentary.
Okay. So, first off, anyone pre-Reformation who was writing for the church was in the Catholic Church. Anyone pre the Great Schism who was writing in the councils was Catholic. Anyone writing before the Minor Schism was part of the Catholic Church. All the church fathers were part of the Catholic Church. All of them, every single one, every single council, every single later council, every single Lateran Council, every single later council or modern council are all Catholic Church. Now, there are some minor councils and minor synods outside of Catholicism, but those are few and far between, and they all happen post-schisms, not pre-schisms. So this doesn't work. Now, there is some argument to be had if you want to call the church Catholic before, I believe it's Ignatius, before Ignatius uses the term Catholic. Also, there are some translations of Origen where he uses the term Catholic as well. So he also uses Trinitarian formula and the word Trinity. Although, when I looked into it, everyone said, yeah, he used the word Trinity and he used the word Catholic, but he didn't use it in the way that the later definition would develop into, so they don't count it as counting. I don't think that's fair. I think if Origen said it first, then Origen should get credit for saying it, but instead Tertullian and Ignatius, and not Ignatius, but the other one who starts with an A. Oh, my crap. Against heresies. Anyway, those three people get credit for everything that Origen said first. But interestingly, a lot of the scholars that I listen to call Origen late. Origen is the first theologian. He's the first. So the fact that his writing, which is the earliest theological writings that we have, is late, I don't get that at all. Origen is the origin. Before that, you have the Gospels, you have maybe the early church fathers, which their writings are they're very little, very few. And you have maybe the letters of, he was a pope. I can't remember his name right now. Clemens? Is it Pope Clemens? You have some pope writings that are pre-Origen. So I don't know. I don't, and I know that there's people who say he wasn't a pope, but on church records he was a pope, so he's a pope. So yeah, so you have a pope, you have Origen, and then you have the church fathers, and the church fathers predate Origen. Obviously, the early church fathers predate Origen. But you go from the early church fathers, and the very first person up, the very first theologian is Origen. Okay, so Origen being unorthodox, that's an interesting question. So according to Protestants, he's a heretic. And according to scholars, some scholars, he's a heretic. But even though they embrace him, but according to Catholics, we never actually anathematize him, and we only anathematized a sect that followed him later. So there was a sect around when Jerome was around that used Origen's name and used principles found in Origen to argue for not resurrection. What's the other word? Reincarnation. And they were labeled. So Origenism was labeled a heresy, but Origen was never labeled a heretic. So it is possible to redeem him. Tertullian, on the other hand, who almost everybody embraces, on the other hand, was an actual legitimate heretic, and yet people still embrace Tertullian's writing because Tertullian is the great defender of the faith who went up against Marcionism. But Tertullian ended up being a heretic. Like, he declared himself schismatic from the Catholic Church. So Tertullian actually was a heretic. But Origen never was a heretic. It was later people following him in a later time period, like 100 and some years later, 200 years later, that had a heresy that was named after Origen. So Origen was never actually declared heretic, except for in Protestant circles, and some secular circles labeled him a heretic because they liked back in a rebel. But in actuality, in his time, he wasn't a heretic. And after his time, he wasn't a heretic, except for when Jerome was forced to distance himself from him because Jerome was doing nothing but talking about how great Origen was, and then they hit Jerome. So it's a little bit political, but Jerome kind of was like pushing forward with his, because he didn't want certain books in the Bible. Yeah. Oh, you looked it up. He wanted certain books in the Bible. He didn't want certain books in the Bible, and so there was some political pressure on him to include the Deuterocanon. He didn't want Revelation. He didn't want the Book of Revelation. He didn't want something else. There was like 3 books that he didn't want. Everybody says it was Maccabees. It wasn't Maccabees. There was something else. I think it was like some of the extra material. I think it was like Esther, or maybe like the longer ending of some of the Greek versions of the ancient text. Any of the scholars in the chat who actually know this material, or any of the scholars who are watching later, please put it in the notes so I can like say the correct thing in tomorrow's video. But in tomorrow's stream, I should say. But anyway, so Origen is getting political pressure, and so he gets hit with, oh, so you're part of the Origen, you're part of Origenism. And he's like, no. I'm not claiming reincarnation. And so he caves, and of course he writes the Vulgate. But in doing so, he ends up trashing Origen and basically destroying Origen's reputation. There's another writer who then tries to defend Origen against Jerome, but it doesn't really take. And when, 500 years later, 1,000 years later, when I guess it's 1,000 years later, 1,000 years later, when the Protestant Reformation happens, the Protestants just run with, oh, Origen's heretic. There can't be multiple ways. There can't be a spiritual reading of the Bible. It has to be a plain and simple reading of the Bible, which is funny because they say that even though they believe in mystical ideas, but whatever. Irony and hypocrisy aside.
It's Martin Luther's commentary.
And it's funny that they were actually talking. I love Origen, so I have a lot of these facts in my head, even though I don't clearly have all the dates and names lined up correctly. They were talking about that this morning, in that Anglican guy who was talking to the Lutheran guy. They were actually having the conversation about Origen and the mysticism factor in Protestantism that Protestantism tries to deny, but they can't get around the spiritual readings to have their interpretation. And they can't get around the dogmatic readings, which come from the Catholic Church, but they can't say that. So they have to somehow say the plain and simple meaning is the dogmatic reading, which doesn't make any sense. Because then you wouldn't have had councils debating people and debating each other and then like declaring people heretics who don't agree with the Orthodox ruling, you know?
On St. Paul's epistle to the Galatians, and it's been translated into modern English. It's phenomenal. I highly recommend it. Look at how thick it is.
taking way too
Luther
long,
had a lot
too.
to say about it. History from the time of the apostles and Christ all the way to the 1500s can be called holy, even at the height of what Luther points out and the other reformers point out are all of the abuses of the church, even at the height of indulgences, even at the height of the gospel.
We still have indulgences now,
or rather,
so
another
this is
infallible
not
rule of
a good
faith
argument.
for the Christian life. That's not what we're saying, right? What we're saying is that the scriptures are clearly defined all throughout the New Testament.
The scriptures are not very clear. The scriptures are very complicated. So there's a literal historical way to read the Gospels, or the Gospels of the Bible, and that's backed up by that type of reading is backed up by Chrysostom and Augustine and Luther. Although it's funny because John Chrysostom is hated by Protestants, and he's the backbone of orthodoxy. There's the spiritual or allegorical. Spiritual was allegorical, moral, and anagological, which is Origin. There's the allegorical, which is I was going to say allergy, allegory, analogy, and metaphor, which is Origin again. There's the typological, which is the moral, ethical, which is Origin and Jerome. There's the anagogical, which I can't say, the anagogic, which is Origin and Cassian. Then there's the liturgical sense, which is Augustine. Then there's the typological, which is Peter, Paul, Jesus, Mark, Matthew, and John. They use typological reading. So when you're denying that there's multiple ways to read it, you're actually denying what Jesus himself does in the Gospels to reinterpret the Old Testament. And then there's the theora, or the mystical or meditative reading of the Bible, which is going to be backed up by Gregory of Nyssa. And I also think Gregory Palmas, also, to be honest with you, is also a mystery reader of the Bible.
In 2 Timothy, this happens all over the place, where the scriptures are spoken of as being inspired, as being theanostats, as being God-breathed, right? Meaning that the church has all kinds of fallible authorities over it, but nevertheless, they are authorities. So an example that Candace actually mentions herself, she said her political mind always goes back to, well, the Supreme Court, right? What is their standard? But the concept is explicitly there. And one of the things that I find faith, even if you have significant portions of the Christian church that don't have access to certain books or who have not realized that certain books have the value that they do, that doesn't affect the ontological quality of the books themselves, right? The scriptures, right? All of the letters of the New Testament, the books of the Bible, they have.
So what happens to your faith if it turns out that these are pseudepigraphal works, that they are anonymous works, that they were created by committee, that these are schools of Peter, Paul, whatever name we have attached to the tradition? These are the schools that came out of those beliefs, out of those churches that are Pauline or Marcion, meaning Mark, Matthean, Petrine, out of these traditions, and they're not actually written by the actual people who we ascribe them to. What happens to your faith then? If this becomes proven, which it might be, scholarship is leaning further and further into that direction. So what happens to your faith if it turns out that's the case? Because remember, Hebrews, even from the very beginning of the church, there was question and doubts about its legitimacy. The book of Revelation, there's question and doubts about its legitimacy. The book of James, question and doubts about its legitimacy. And don't forget that all three of the books that I just mentioned, Luther didn't want in the Bible. So,
have an ontological quality of being inspired, right? And because of that, they're also infallible. And so
most Protestants can't respond to the infallible book without an infallible list argument. Even Gavin Ortlund has trouble. Yeah, well, I mean, to be honest with you, until Gavin backed Javier, Gavin's probably the Protestant that I hold highest in esteem under him, Matt Whitman, under him, probably Jordan B. Cooper. Now, because Gavin Ortlund has backed up this guy, which I really wish he hadn't backed this guy, and because Matt Whitman has said some ugly, ugly stuff about Catholicism when interviewing a few Protestants on non-ecumenical issues. Both of those people have dropped in my estimation a lot. By the way, I'm not expecting them to agree with Catholicism. That's not what I'm saying. Just what they said was horrendous. So right now, the person who I hold in highest esteem in the Protestant realm is Jordan B. Cooper. Under him, Gavin Ortlund. Under him, Matt Whitman, and then everybody else who's Protestant. So that's currently where my rankings are of apologists and famous Protestants. When it comes to heretics, though, my number one heretic is going to be Origen. My number two heretic is going to be Kierkegaard. My number three heretic is probably going to be Master Eckhart, even though I haven't read enough of his stuff to really know what his beliefs are. And after him, my favorite heretic is going to be Tertullian. Those are my favorite heretics. And I go to them for advice and for life advice and for theological views all the time. So, I don't hate the heretics. I enjoy them. They're fun. But they're heretics. And you got to realize that when you're reading them. You can't have their heretical beliefs override your orthodox beliefs. You can have them inform the greater picture, but you have to hold on to your orthodoxy. Otherwise, you yourself become heterodox. Kind of how that goes.
Whether or not people recognize it as such does not actually affect the ontological quality of these things. And assuming that as Protestants, if we're right, and there is no other infallible source, or rather rule of faith for the church, if that doesn't exist with the early church,
Oh, sorry. The pseudo Thomas. I don't know what your previous. I don't know where the comment is coming from, so I'm just going to read your comment without knowing its context because I don't know what you're responding to. The Theologica Mystica by Pseudo Diodorus. I don't have Pseudo Diodorus. The Areopathigate. It's awesome. I'm going to put that on my list. Thomas, I will read it. And if it's not awesome, I'm going to make you pay me back for that book. I'm going to make you donate to my to whatever it is I have at that time for donations if the book isn't awesome. I'm going to hold you accountable on YouTube. Such a dumb joke. Such a toothless threat and such a dumb joke. Oh, I almost made an OF joke, and I know that would actually get me in trouble, so I'm glad I didn't. I don't need this channel to get banned. Anyway, you know what? That's what I'm going to do for my. I need to do something for my membership, for my member rewards, and for my Patreon. I'll my next book that I'm going to read. I'll do live reads as my Patreon thing. Do you trust the scholarship of the Dark Magisterium? Ooh, that's a good question, Juan. Yes, with a caveat. With a caveat and a lot of asterisks. I don't believe they're being dishonest. I do believe they have an agenda. I do believe they have a bias against dogma and against authority. And I used to have it as a suspicion that they had that bias, but I've now read John Barton and John Barton's view, and I think the way that he presents it means that it's actually the view of modern secular scholarship, is that the only way to read the Bible correctly is to eliminate or counter or oppose dogma and authoritative readings, which also means rejecting the concept of univocality, whatever, and which in effect means you have to throw out hermeneutics. which then throws out several of the ways of interpreting the Bible and goes back to a Protestant plain and simple reading, but now being used to attack the Bible instead of being used to defend the Bible. So the plain and simple reading of the Bible is contradictory to some of the dogmatic and theological developments that we have. So because of that, he's poisoning his own well. He's attacking his own stance by arguing for a plain and simple reading, because without dogmatic and theological interpretations, you don't get things like the Trinity. You don't get things like a monotheistic God. You don't get things like a God who's omnipotent, out of time, out of space, outside of reality, but can affect reality. You don't get any of those things from the Bible alone if the texts can't interpret each other. If you can't do midrashic interpretation of the Bible at all in any kind of way and have it be legitimate in scholarly criticism, you don't get to our theological understandings of any of the councils. Any of them. You just can't get there. If the books can't help interpret each other, you're stuck. If each book has to be interpreted independently, you can't get the conflict and the paradoxes you need to get the theology that we have. So when I say that I trust their scholarship, if you take into account their biases, then what they're pointing out is exactly the heresies and problems that orthodoxy is designed to fight. And once you see it that way, perfect. Their understanding is exact, because if you don't have an authority, if you don't have a magisterium, you don't have a pope, you don't have the councils, you don't have the church fathers, then yeah, their reading is the correct reading, because you don't have the paradoxes and mystery and conflict to get those readings out of the text. Somebody is commenting, and whatever you're saying, YouTube isn't liking, so it's not showing up in my chat. So I'm going to move my picture so I can see what you're saying. Oh, it's Juan. Oh, I don't know why they blocked that one. Let's see. Their work on... it's because you said slavery. You can't say slavery, dude. YouTube's going to automatically block it. But I have a little widget that lets me still see what you type. But yeah, you got automatically blocked. It's not in the chat. Find a different way to word it. But I'll read it out loud. Their work on slavery in the Bible is one... It's not showing up. One of the tough for Christians to handle. It's not tough for people like Jimmy Akin or Trent Horn to handle, mostly because we've dealt with, we have papal decrees to get around all that kind of stuff. So we don't have to say the Bible doesn't say something it says. We can say, yeah, it says it, but the church has interpreted differently. It's really hard for Protestants who only have the Bible as their sole authority, because they're not even using God as their sole authority. They're using the Bible as their sole authority. So they're stuck. If they have a moral or ethical dilemma, then if the Bible can never be wrong, that means the Bible can never endorse this thing that it clearly endorsed. On the other hand, if you have, it's people who wrote the Bible and they can interpret things incorrectly, but we have the final full revelation and through reason and time, we can unlock more and more. Then we can say, yeah, the Bible did say that, but we now understand that it's wrong. But that doesn't mean that it's divinely wrong. It just means that it's ethically not proper. And it took a long time for people to understand that. So, yeah. Swan is the only apologist that seems to make a congruent response to them. But he's also more boring than I am, and I get pretty boring. So, while I might agree with you, Juan, I do think Sona needs help in the entertainment value of his content. I wish I was as popular as Sona, because I think me and him would make a pretty good pair. I like him a lot. But I think with my cussing and my love of high fantasy, which includes things like Dungeons and Dragons and Cyberpunk, I don't think I'm too welcome in the circles that he runs in.
His opinion is very varied. And so when Martin Luther and the you notice in that clip the reason why George Farmer
Like in all honesty, and I'm not saying this to be, I'm not saying this to throw out an olive branch. Me and Kip Davis hanging out would probably be a great time. You could show me hockey. We could listen to heavy metal. We could talk comic books. Me and Dan McKellen would probably have a great time arguing about Wolverine and comics. I have over 5,000. I have maybe more than that. I could have 10,000, but I have at least 5,000 comics in a back room. So yeah, no, me and him could definitely have a great time. I don't see that happening with me and Sona. I don't see that happening with me and Trent. Even though Trent likes martial arts, he likes the opposite kind of martial art that I like. He loves jujitsu. I'm not a fan of jujitsu. I like taekwondo. I like karate. I like pankration. I like kickboxing. I like Muay Thai. So me and him are probably wouldn't have a great conversation. Probably.
is going back and forth on, well, I was asking myself the question of how many times the Pope spoke infallibly, and so once I realized that, well, most Roman Catholic theologians say it 7 times. The reason why he had to add that in there, the most, and why he had to say it's a complex issue that they debate out, is because the answer to the question, how many times has the Pope spoken infallibly, the official answer to that is, they don't know. They don't know. The Pope has never revealed an infallible list of infallible teachings that he's given.
Again, he's just trying to be ironic. The reason why we say, the actual reason why we say maybe 7, maybe 5, is because there's 2 different branches of interpretive, and there's some papal writings that may be falsely attributed. So even though the expression itself, the lesson might be infallible, we don't know if it actually goes back to the Pope because, you didn't really keep good records at certain periods of time. The other reason is because we don't know if what a Pope is saying now, whoever's the current Pope now, and even maybe like the last 2, 3 popes, we don't know if what they're saying is infallible. It could take years for a statement to be declared infallible. So when we say he's only said maybe 7 infallible things, it's because there could be some of the things could be ruled to be infallible later in the future. Trent and Gavin made a fool of themselves in the debate. I'm assuming he's talking about with Kip and Bowen. I don't think they made fools of themselves, actually. I disagree with you here, Juan. Not because I think they won. I don't want to make that impression. Or not, I say sure they won. I don't think that not that I think that they were correct, but I think they won. I think they were rhetorically more polished. They were better at the conversation. And to the audience that they were talking to the people who were scared of what Kip and Bowen were saying, they won enough, if you can kind of get what I'm saying. So they won enough or they were victorious enough, they had enough defeaters that people can now ignore Dan and Joshua Bowen, and they don't have to think about it. They're like, okay, well, our apologists can respond to them. Even if I don't know the correct response, our apologists know the correct response. And that's kind of all they needed to do. They needed to show that they were not rhetorically undefeatable. And so in that way, they succeeded. So that's kind of my view on it. It's not that they got the facts right. I don't even think Trent agrees with Gavin's facts. I want to be very clear. If you listen to Trent talk about it, he was there to back up and help Gavin win. He wasn't there to fight for the truth. So that's problematic, in my opinion.
In fact, there is no list of infallible teachings that holes in our boat. He's poking holes in his own boat, right? And so this is something that we got to keep an eye out. Infallible teachings from the Pope, right? And that's how you end up with situations where you have.
Okay, like I said, this guy's showing himself to be a dishonest interlocutor and a bad faith apologist and a polemicist. So it's too bad. We're going to do this one. We're going to then watch the ending of the one that we started with him, and then we're going to be done for the night. We got a while to go, though. Don't think that I'm saying that we're done. We got a while to go. This is going to be bits and pieces, and then we got another one to go. So we still got maybe 30 minutes minimum, an hour and a half maximum to go.
And if Lutheranism is going down the tubes here, where else can we go?
And remain Lutheran.
Okay, thank you. I've known about the East for a very long time. My best friend in high school was a Russian Orthodox, and sadly, he's now a Buddhist. But, I went to school just outside of New York City at Concordia College in Bronxville, New York. And at that time, it's only a couple of miles away from St. Vladimir's Orthodox Seminary. And at that time, St. Vladimir Seminary didn't even teach Greek to their students. So they came to Concordia Bronxville to learn Greek. So we got to know a lot of the students there. They invited us to come for different worship services. I remember the first time I ever experienced an Orthodox.
Disciplined and focused on like the scriptures and on the.
I think he was evangelical in this back, Presbyterian maybe, I'm not really sure. But
he was Presbyterian.
Presbyterian. He goes to a Roman mass, right? And he's just blown away. It's like, oh, we're being raised in the Maryland suburbs. And when we didn't go home to Virginia to that church, they didn't go to church.
In various corners of the Protestant umbrella today is one of like, well, yeah, of course, our faith is tied to these historical events in the scriptures. And then it's like, that's it. Like everything goes dark until we get to today in the 21st century.
And we believe that because those words are the words of the eternal Son of God, they cause to be and give us exactly what they say, the body of Christ.
I'm going to be honest. I'm looking for like something interesting to bite into, some good meat. But so far, it seems like William Whedon so far hasn't said anything crazy. And mind you, we're skipping around. So he might be a good pastor. He might be a good apologist. He might be a good defender of the faith. He might be in good faith. So nothing against him so far. But again, Javier has shown himself to be bad faith, a bad faith interlocutor.
I had not prepared to share this one passage with you, but I want to. So can you hold on one second as I dig it up? About the sacrifice. In the celebration of the Eucharist, we proclaim the Lord's death, and we pray that God would be merciful to us on account of that holy and immaculate sacrifice completed on the cross, and on account of that holy victim, which is certainly present in the Eucharist. That he.
I'm gonna for my next.
So, what I'm hoping, as Javier continues into Lutheranism, is that he will begin to learn what Lutheranism actually teaches. He'll begin to do the practices, even the more, let's call them Catholic practices, or if you want, classical or ancient Christian practices. And as he gets more, hopefully as he starts reading more and gets maybe more into the Church Fathers or more into whatever, I don't know if it's going to be the Book of Divine Prayer, if it's the Liturgy of the Hours, if it's Divine Office, whatever it is that they do for their prayer, for their daily prayer. As he gets into practice, I'm hoping that he'll grow in faith and he'll understand that what he's been saying is wrong. That doesn't mean that he's going to become Catholic. It just means that he'll grow in his faith in a proper way instead of this improper immaturity that he's been showing in his videos.
This question, I'm going to invert the order in which I ask questions.
He's not a mature Christian, to put it in a different way. This guy is a mature Christian, it seems. This guy is not.
4 and 5.
Which actually means he shouldn't be talking about the faith yet.
So Rome and the East, as we talk about, citing, for example, like you just did, theologians from the Lutheran Golden Age of Orthodoxy, as we talk about hymns that go long
pictures of God. Or maybe even his famous words to St. Jerome. He wrote a lot. Jerome was a little prickly. Augustine had disagreed with him, and Jerome didn't like that. And Jerome Augustine writes back to Jerome. He's like, look, only those books of scripture, which are called canonical, have I learned. This
is what we are just talking about a little while ago. And basically, if you want to call it blackmail, you can call it blackmail. Or you want to call it divine providence, you can call it divine providence. Jerome caves and does do the Vulgate with all the books, including all the Catholic books. He doesn't do all the Orthodox books, but that's a different story. But yeah, no, they're all in there. So the Vulgate is the Vulgate. It has the Deuterocanon.
Learn to hold in such honor as, the question is not, what benefits did baptism give you? The question is,
Yeah. So
you said that
Javier's not saying as much in this one, but Whedon seems to be more well-read and more mature in his faith than Javier. He understands the Lutheran small catechism, the Lutheran catechism, the Church Fathers' relevancy to Luther's beliefs and to Lutheran beliefs. Yeah, he seems to be much more well-rounded.
a gift that God gives. It's never something, it's not an innate human strength. A priest or a pastor and a bishop. It's the same term that's being used for both.
Of calling them presidents. If
Of us not being Donatist, I mean, we should be able to look at it and say, look,
for some people, topics like apostolic succession, some of these things may.
Let me give you a quote from St. Basil on this, because people will say, Luther dreamed up sola fide. It's like, I've always wondered.
And what he was about to say there is what Jimmy Aiken was arguing, is that there are ways to interpret the solas that can be compatible with Catholicism. But the problem is that you have to twist the meaning out of and away from Protestant meaning and Reformation meaning, especially American Protestantism. So you have to just throw away all of American Protestantism and American evangelicalism, go back to the Reformation meaning, then adapt and tweak the Reformation meaning of these terms back into Catholic terminology, and then you can make it compatible with modern Catholicism post-Vatican II or in the spirit of Vatican II. That's a lot of work. But yeah, I mean, it's possible. Tulip, not so much, but, and you do have, I disagree with Jimmy on one thing, which is you really can't get Sola Scriptura to work in a Catholic sense. You have to completely change what Sola Scriptura means to make it work in a Catholic sense. Okay, let's go and finish let's finish
Jesus, when he said in Matthew
original
7,
video.
verse 15, beware false prophets.
Video.
And remember, for my audience, this is an anti-apologetics channel. I am doing ministry for the outcast, for the rebel, for the outsider. So if you are someone who is outside of the church currently, you're someone who's left the faith because of an abuse scandal or because of a bad experience with a Christian. I myself, when I was a child, was jumped, beat up by 3 Christians whose parents told them that I was lying about my mother being dead. And they beat the royal shit out of me. And I had an out-of-body experience, whatever. And from there, I got weird and I got picked on by the very people who called themselves Christians. And I left the faith. And these were Christians. These were Protestants. These weren't Catholics, mind you. But I left the faith. The 3 kids that jumped me, I believe they were Catholic, or at least one of them was. I think. Should I name? No, I shouldn't name because it's long gone. I think one of them was Catholic, but the other 2, I don't know what they're. Well, maybe, yeah. I think the other guy was Catholic. So 2 of them were. But the people who picked on me afterwards were Protestants. Anyway, not the point. The point is that none of that means anything. You can't let these traumas and these things control you. I don't think that's what I was originally saying. I think I got distracted in my own memory, and I lost my thread. So I have no idea what I was saying. I'm sure it was beautiful. I'm sure it was about forgiveness. Oh, there you go. Outreach. So I am doing outreach to the Wiccan, to the Satanist, to the Luciferian, to the LGBTQ person, to the atheist, to the anti-theist. God still loves you. So I'm talking to you. If you want to talk to me and tell me what your beliefs are or tell me why I'm wrong about my beliefs, I will listen to you. This is not the kind of channel where I'm going to preach to you about how you're evil and wicked and going to hell. That's not what I do here. There's just as much chance that you go to hell that I go to hell. Okay, so we're not playing that game here. I hope I get to heaven. I hope you get to heaven. And that's what I got. I have hope. I believe that God loves me, and I believe that God loves the world, and so I believe that God loves you. There we go. He so loved the world that he gave up his only son. So I am not here to judge. I'm here to spread the word that God has forgiven you. And all you got to do is accept his forgiveness and then change your ways and follow him. That's it. That's my message. That's my ministry. So I don't care if you're not a Catholic. I don't care if you're a Protestant. I don't care what you are. If you want to come on this channel and share your views, I will listen. And if you want to disagree with me, I will listen. But the moment you start berating my audience or hurting or arguing or insulting people in my audience, that's when I kick you off my channel and ban you. As long as you don't do that, we can have a conversation and we can argue and everything. All right. That's it. I just want to do that little reminder. This is an anti-apologetics channel. This is not a Christian channel. We do philosophy and history here, and we do analysis of debates. And we do live streams where we just do random topics. 1 week religion, 1 week secular, 1 week religion, 1 week secular on the live stream. And yeah, we just try to have fun. And then on my videos that do best are my debate videos, are my either me debating or me commenting and reviewing debates. There we go. Oh, good, hit play.
He's factually wrong. In fact, I know he's factually wrong because the Catholic Church has clear things that have anathemas attached to it.
Oh, yeah, clear things that have anathemas attached to them. And we can't decide, not even just on the ecclesial side, but in the Roman Catholic tradition in particular, if those anathemas are actually, it sounds like, active today or...
And in that, there's 3 paragraphs that distinguish between 3 levels of authoritative teaching.
All right, guys. So here I've pulled up the document that Joe is talking about, from the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, and it's their profession of faith, right? And so, as we can...
It's just the Nicene Creed. It's just the Nicene Constantinopolitan Creed. That's it. And these are the essential beliefs of all Christians, if they're going to call themselves Trinitarian and Apostolic.
Hopefully you can see it here. I'm zoomed in. The website loaded in a little bit weird, so it's all like kind of on the left-hand side. So I know I'm probably blocking some of it since I should be here in the bottom left corner. But if you will look to the right where my mouse is, right, you're like, whoa, this is very long. So this is going to lay out just all the list of propositions that Roman Catholics believe, like all the essentials. Is this their infallible list of essentials? No, because what Joe's referencing is only this long. That's it.
But that's all that's it. That's even when the Pope was confronted by a rad trad journalist. I believe it was rad trad. It could have just been a secular journalist. And they said, well, are you heretical or whatever? He goes, I'm Christian. I believe in Christian things. If you want proof of that, I can recite the creed for you right now. And he got very defensive and very aggressive about it. That's it. You get baptized, you follow the sacraments, that's it. That's really it. That's all there is to it. Get baptized. If you're going to get married, and go to confession. Go to communion at least once a year. Go to confession at least once a year. What else? If you're going to get married, get married. If you're going to have a vocation, have a vocation. If you're not called to anything, then you're fine. Do what's called unction, which is just basically care for sick people. That's it. Yeah. Does the church need an infallible list of traditions, or does the question ignore the whole purpose of tradition? Well, there's a difference between tradition, lowercase t, and capital case T, holy tradition. And Protestants have from the beginning, like since the Augsburg Confession and some of the earlier writings, pre or proto-Protestant writings that I've seen, have a real confusion on this. Capital T tradition or holy tradition is just the liturgy. It's just divine liturgy. It's just communion and liturgical rites and hymns, which comes down to the Psalms. There's this great debate between, I say great, not as in big, but as in a lot of good comes out of it. Although it seems to have done James White no good whatsoever. Because he keeps quoting this and missing the point of it. He asked a priest if there's anything in divine and holy tradition that you can't find in the Bible. And the priest goes, no, it's all there. It's all in the Bible. And he's like, was there anything in Holy Tradition that contradicts the Bible? And he's like, no, it completely coincides with the Bible. And so James White just keeps missing the point of that. So Holy Tradition, part of Holy Tradition is the Bible. The Bible itself is part of tradition. It's saying, hey, these are the holy inspired works. This is it. These are the books that are inspired. Why? Because this particular person wrote it? No, because we don't know who really wrote it. Why? Because it gets the historical facts right? No, because we don't know the historical facts. And then why is it inspired? Because the church says so. Well, why does the church say so? Because this is the stuff that was handed down apostolically from the early church up until it was canonized long after the Protestant Reformation. So this is just the tradition. So before it was canonized, the scriptures that we read were just part of tradition. It wasn't canonized until way later. Holy tradition is just a preservation of the faith. That's it. And that includes things like liturgy. Assumption of Mary is part of Holy Tradition. It's part of the tradition that was passed on. You want to see the development of it. There's seeds of it from obviously the early pre-Nicene church or ante-Nicene church. But you want to see the strongest development out of it. It's going to come out of a group of writings that's called the Desert Father writings. So there's the Church Fathers, there's the Desert Fathers, there's the Church Mothers, and then there's the Doctors of the Faith. Doctors of the Faith, this is an overly broad summary. This is not technically correct, but this is just a way to understand it. The medieval Doctors of the Faith are Augustine and Thomas Aquinas and other figures like that. So that's the medieval period. And then onward until today. There's still Doctors of the Faith declared up till today. And then you have what you might want to call the Church Fathers, the late Church Fathers, the Church Fathers, the early Church Fathers. And the early Church Fathers are the ones who are writing pre-Nicene Creed. So they're developing the dogma and theology they're pulling these strings out of the Bible. And they're doing these amazing Bible commentaries and these amazing debates, and they're countering people like Marcion. This is why Tertullian is so beloved, because a lot of Tertullian's arguments are the arguments we see in later things like the Roman Catholic, like the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Now, you see, I keep on doing it, and the Lutheran catechisms. So a lot of the catechisms, the theology in them is the theology that's presented by Tertullian, and by Ignatius. No, not Ignatius. I keep on saying Ignatius. The guy with an A. Athanasius? Anyway, against heresies. So you have these very important works that kind of define what the faith is by defining what it isn't. So in most proper catechisms, it never says what the faith is. It just says this is what it is not. So the faith can be anything, but it can't be these things. And it makes a square. It makes an outline of what it can't be. So here's the wall. Anything beyond that is heterodox. Anything within it is orthodox, and it doesn't have to agree with each other. You can have differing views as long as you don't go past that outer rim, that outer wall. But the closer you are to that, the closer you are to the heresy, the less comfortable people are with your beliefs in orthodoxy.
Paragraphs long.
So call it slouching to Bethlehem, call it tendency towards sin or inclination towards sin, call it, tending toward heresy. But it's the outer edge of acceptable practice and acceptable belief that's you're verging on to heretical and heterodox belief. But lowercase t custom, lowercase t tradition, lowercase c custom is not heterodox. It's within the realm of acceptable orthodoxy. They don't have to match. Saints in different parishes can be different. Saints in different traditions can be different. As long as you get the main ones right, as long as all the apostles are in heaven, you're going to be fine. That kind of thing. So yeah.
And so let's see what these things are, because wow, like the list of essentials from the Roman Catholic Magisterium, Joe Heschmeyer. Let's compare that, right? If we want to.
That's not what he just said right there is not acceptable. He's equating Joe Heschmeyer with the Magisterium. That's not okay. That even if that's a slip of the tongue, that's not okay.
Zoom on down to one tradition. Let's compare that to the tradition that I'm a part of, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. Let's see. So,
and again, the way that he's doing this is kind of saying, well, all the other Protestant traditions aren't as good as my tradition. That doesn't work either, buddy.
The Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, Profession of Faith. Let's start reading together, all right? So I name...
This is just the Nicene Creed.
With firm faith, believe and profess each and everything that is contained in the symbol of faith, namely, and this is just the Nicene Creed.
Yes.
This right here?
Well, read it. They're each individual points that were debated at the first 2-3 councils, and also some of the minor councils. These were big deals because this is arguing against Marcionism, Arianism, all the major heresies. These are saying, okay, these heresies aren't true. This is defining what the faith is not what the faith is, what the faith is not. So as long as you affirm these things and you're baptized, you're a Christian. This is defining what a Christian is, or more importantly, defining what a Christian is not. So if you don't hold one of these views, you're not a Christian. By definition, this is the definition of a Christian. This is what a Christian believes. This is what someone in the Orthodox tradition believes. This is what a lot of the scholars get wrong. A lot of the scholars think that what's defined in the Bible is defining Christianity. That's not the case. It's what's here that is defining what's in the Bible. So this is defining what the Bible is teaching. This is saying, hey, the Bible has all these definitions. We don't have terms for it. So let's put it out and let's get some terminology going. And all this would have been in Latin, by the way, Latin and Greek.
Guess what I have here in my hand? I have the Book of Concord, the Reader's Edition, actually. Very, very nice. You should get a copy yourself.
So this is bad that he's doing this because I was giving him an excuse. I was giving him an out, saying, well, maybe he hasn't read this yet. So if he's read this, then everything that he's saying he knows is wrong. He's condemning himself. He's perjuring himself with this. I also recommend you read the Concordia if you want to learn what Lutherans believe.
The Book of Concord is the Lutheran Confessions. Look at how weighty this is, right? He's just comparing a few paragraphs here to the Book of Concord, the Lutheran Confessions. And what we have at the very, very beginning of the Book of Concord, the 3 universal or ecumenical creeds.
This is just from the early church councils. This is from the early church fathers. I'm going to skip ahead because he's being reductive and he's being sarcastic in a way that is unpleasant.
Some things expressly set out in Scripture. Other things are surmised from good and necessary consequence when we fit all these other different truths in different places together. And
that's a catchphrase. That's phraseology. Good and necessary consequence. That's phraseology. That's theology entering his lexicon.
Left with only one way to solve these different.
And there's not only one way to solve. There's only one way that's true.
It seems like his own system dies by his own sword. And let me also read you guys, because we'll get to that in a second. I know it's going to be but 2 quote, dies by his own sword. Everything is clear. Has been to simply point out this agreement allowed. Say that because the magisterium might allow things like natural family planning, therefore all forms of contraception and other things and family planning measures are allowed.
That's not true at all. This is a terrible argument. This is absolutely terrible. This is nonsense. I was hoping he was going to read the creed and go down the list of what we have in common, what we don't have in common, which you would find out we have everything in common on the creed. No, this is kind of gross what he's doing right here. I can't find another word but evil. So I'm going to skip ahead.
When they get cornered, they restate the Roman Catholic position and they act as though that's an argument, or they act as though that's new information. It isn't. We already knew, Joe, that you needed to submit to the Roman Catholic magisterium. That's why you're a Roman Catholic. And if the best that you can provide is just something that says, oh, the essentials is you agreeing on the essentials with the Roman Catholic magisterium.
The magisterium is just the teaching office or the teaching branch of the church. Your parents are part of the magisterium, technically. The priest is part of the magisterium. The bishops are part of the magisterium. Your great-grandmother is part of the magisterium. To different degrees, of course. Theologians, even secular theologians, can be part of the magisterium. They can add advice. The official magisterium is the Pope with all the bishops and all the priests, maybe even the deacons. That's it. The magisterium is the Pope and the bishops all put together. It's just a different word for the teaching office or teaching branch of the church. And like I said, in a non-fundamentalist way, even your parents are part of the magisterium because they're the ones teaching you the faith as a child. You're giving too much importance to the word magisterium, which is just teaching office.
You started smoking when you were 16. But as Van Vliet points out, the mother may be inconsistent. She might even be a hypocrite. But that doesn't invalidate her argument. Liars, manipulators, and even hypocritical parents can create good arguments. So if the critique is true, it doesn't matter if the critic is a hypocrite for raising it. This comes up all the time.
Okay, I'm going to end with Joe's statement, and I don't even want to hear what Javier is going to say next because he kind of disgusted me with what he did with the creed right now. If an atheist or an anti-theist was doing that, it wouldn't bother me at all. But I guess he's saying he's a confessional Christian, although I'm not sure if that's true. But let's say he is a confessional Christian. What he just did is the height of hypocrisy and blasphemy. Don't ever, if you're a Christian, never use the creeds that way. Never. The creeds are not there to attack another person. They're there for concord and unity. They're there to say that these are the universal beliefs, the essential beliefs of all Christians. As long as you affirm these, you're officially a Christian, assuming you're baptized. That's it. If you're validly baptized and you affirm the creeds, you're a Christian. This is the definition of Christian. There's nothing else to be a Christian. There's a lot else to be a Catholic, but there's nothing else essential to be a Christian. You have to believe that Jesus is God. You have to believe that he's part of a Trinity, that Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. You have to believe that there's only one God. You have to believe there's only one true church, and that one true church translates into one. There's only one true way, only one way, which is Christ. One true, holy, and apostolic church, only one truth, only one way to God, which is Christ. These are what these things mean. Never do what he just, if you're a Christian and you're watching this, never do what he just did with the creed. He's asking for damnation. He's saying, maybe he's once saved, only saved, and he thinks he can't do anything wrong. But as far as I know, Lutherans are not once saved, only saved. So what he just did right there was gross. What Joe Heschmeyer is doing is correct. Again, I am not a defender of Joe Heschmeyer. I have plenty of videos I have like 3 or 4 videos of my own critiquing and correcting Joe Heschmeyer. But Joe Heschmeyer is right, not just in character, but in conclusion and in argumentation in his video, and Javier is not. And that's not just because I'm Catholic. I'm defending Christianity right now. I'm not defending Catholicism. There is a definition of Christian, and that definition is someone who's baptized validly and holds to the creeds. If you are not holding to the creeds, then you're not confessional. You just said that Lutheranism is confessional and you're a Lutheran, so therefore you're confessional. Christianity was defined in Orthodoxy, which is what scholars will say, but I'm going to use the more generic term. Christianity was defined in the councils. and by the church fathers. And if you are working by that definition, that working definition, then all you have to do is affirm the creeds, affirm the councils, and now you're apostolic because you're affirming holy tradition. You are affirming the laying on of hands of priests and bishops. That's apostolic. So if you're apostolic, if you have priest in your tradition, which Lutherans have priest, then you're apostolic. So now you're apostolic and you're confessional, which means you're creedal. And if you're baptized, you're a Christian. So you're a Christian if you're baptized correctly through the correct form, and you're confessional or creedal if you submit to the creeds, and you're apostolic if your tradition has priests that pass on the tradition. Or even if they just have a tradition that passes on, that goes on from Christ, you're apostolic. Javier, you really need to go back and rethink of everything that you're doing and everything that you're saying. I hope God forgives you, and I hope you find a way to find peace and unity and ecumenicalism with Catholics, because they're not your enemy. All right. That's it for tonight, guys. We're going to get to the music. I know some people already dipped out, but that's okay. Thomas, it was good seeing you today. Juan, it was good seeing you today. Legends, I haven't seen you in a long time. It's good to have you back. We didn't have a large show today, or large audience today, but we had an okay showing for a little while. I hope you all had a good time, and I will see you all tomorrow where we do the Techno Puritans. Let's do this. Y'all have a good night. Remember, God loves you, God forgives you, so go and forgive everybody else. And spread the message. Spread the word.
And I just need to move on. I'm open to a new place, a new road. I'm on my own, but I'm better off alone. Yeah, I'm better off alone. And I wake up to a new day in the same place with a new flame. It's not too late, I'll be okay. Leave behind all that led to my pain. And I know it's never really ever quite perfect, but I know the hardest things are always worth it. Yeah, I'm all alone and still learning to let go. I'll carry on my own and find out where I belong. And I just need to move on. I have hope, I'm open to a new place, a new road. I'm on my own, but I'm better off alone. Yeah, I'm better off alone. Got demons in my head, they're better off dead. I'll find a way to kill this sorrow. Got demons in my head, I used to regret being a better place tomorrow. Got demons in my head, they're better off dead. I'll find a way to kill this sorrow. Got demons in my head, I used to regret being a better place tomorrow. I wake up to a new day in the same place with a new flame. I will make change, I will make a new life.